I'm Colleen Lindstrom. I'm a former host here at My Talk. I'm currently a #1 fan of My Talk and sometime fill-in. But you usually tune into My Talk to hear us talk about fun things, to talk about, that's what we say, where talk is fun. But sometimes pop culture collides with a real life event or a real life situation, and it becomes really important to have a deeper conversation about that. And that's what we're doing here on this My Talk Roundtable.
That's one of my favorite things. Would fight with you right now because I think I listen more than you do. So I was a little annoyed that you said you're the #1 listener. But I will say what the coolest thing about My Talk is we do take on the hard conversations. We do take on awesome things. And if there's conversations to be had, we do have them.
We're not going to shy away from them. And so today, our talk is about domestic violence. And there's a couple of things that I want to make note of that are making this a particularly timely conversation. And one of them is the movie It Ends With Us. And that is a movie that you've heard about. It's in theaters. And it is a movie that stars and is produced and directed by Justin Baldoni. He is going to be joining us a little bit later in this hour, actually in the very next segment. So you're going to get a chance to hear from Justin himself. Mm-hmm. And we're also going to be joined by a couple people with an organization called No More. That's that they served in an advisory role on the movie It Ends With Us. We're going to be joined by Pamela Zaballa, who is the global CEO of No More, and Jane Randel, who is a co-founder of No More. So we're going to have a lot of voices in the room in this hour talking about domestic violence. And then in the second hour, we're very excited. Jen Polzin from Tubman, which is a local organization right here in our backyard in the Twin Cities. She's going to be talking with us too about some different perspectives and ways that that we can help, and the ways that Tubman helps people who are affected by domestic violence. And so, as we're here, our initial kind of thoughts as we're getting started in this conversation, things that you're hoping to learn, Brittany Kendall, things that you are thinking about as we get started in this deep dive?
Well, first up, thanks, Colleen, so much for doing this. I think
yes.
It's something, we've all been talking about, and it's what I really like about some of these things is we're going to also find out stuff where we can help out. Yeah. And like, for me, that's so powerful because it's so scary to hear about things that happen in your community and people and yourself, and you kind of realize a lot. And then to just have this is how we can help, especially with Tubman being here in your own community.
Yeah.
I think that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of us, you think of domestic violence in only one way, right? It's always something maybe from a certain socioeconomic area of the community. Maybe it's something that only happens with a husband and wife. So to find out more about who this can affect, the way that things change and the narrative changes when famous people, like I think of the Rihanna case. Obviously, this movie, It Ends With Us.
Yeah.
When that starts becoming part of the public conversation, do more people come forward? And how do we spot it in the community?
Yeah.
How do we spot if it's happening to us? I think that is pretty imperative with the whole thing.
So I actually want to talk about one thing you just said. How do we spot if it's happening to us?
Yes.
That might actually sound kind of strange to certain ears, right?
Right.
But this is one of the things I appreciated so much about the book and the movie, It Ends With Us, both of which I read the book 3 days before I watched the movie. And when I say
really?
3 days before, I mean in
read?
one day, because I'm a power reader. That's how I roll. And I do believe in reading books in their entirety before I see them on the screen. So I went to see the movie, and one of the things that struck me about it is the way that the story is told. It's told in such a way that you can understand the I don't want to say the position. You understand the perspective of Lily, who is the female star, loving somebody so much, with so many good qualities, with so much to love, and actually not understanding or being clear about what is happening to her.
Yeah.
Right.
Not knowing how to identify herself, or if she should identify herself as a victim. Believing that every time is the last time.
Yeah.
There's so much about it that because so many people don't have an intimate experience with domestic love or domestic violence in their loved ones, in their family systems, or in their romantic situations. I think we have a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
A lot of people have a lot of opinions about how it should go.
Yeah.
Right.
And this was a really wonderful opportunity to see a different perspective and hear a different perspective.
Yeah.
It is. Sorry, go ahead, Brittany.
No, I was going to say, I mean, I read the book and I felt like the storytelling of it in the love story, I went into the book not knowing what it was about at all. And I thought I was reading a love story. And that kind of messed with my head in a way that I wanted it to. It changed, the way that you think, is that you weirdly are rooting for them. And you shouldn't be. I mean, I think the author did a really good job with tapping into that.
Yeah. And then, and then the movie really kind of brought it into a visual, so like engaged yet another sense in your way of processing it. It for me, it was such a hugely transformative experience to watch it in this way and feel like I was identifying with certain, and troubling. Like I'm going to actually say it's like
I would say that's where I have hiccups, where I go, oh, and you said identify in yourself, and identify, kind of looking back. You can look back at other relationships you've had in your past, and you go, oh, that's what that was, and that hurts. That's hard.
Yeah.
Or it makes you look at people
Totally.
and think, boy, I thought it was so much easier. I thought it was so black and white.
Yeah.
I thought, why wouldn't it just be easy for that person to leave? And you start to see when you watch a movie, you are intimately interwoven with the lives of the people you're watching, even though in this case they're fictional characters.
Right. But you feel like
you know them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you start to have a different experience watching a movie about something difficult like domestic violence, and you find yourself leaning into it in a different way. And that's, I think, and I'm hopeful we're going to hear more from our guests as we go on, exactly what we were supposed to be experiencing in this movie.
It's with everything. It's just so complex, right? I mean, there's nothing simple about any of this. And all the dynamics come into play. I mean, the good, the bad, it all comes into play. And it's conversations worth having. And I think, like you said, there is a stigma attached to it. And that shame aspect, which, it shouldn't be there, right? We can say that all day, but it's there. And until it's talked about and open, it's just, it will be there.
It just will be.
Yeah.
Well, and I think just researching, knowing this was coming up and wanting to educate ourselves about this too. Like finding out that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence by a domestic partner. Those numbers blew my mind, and reading about how children are affected by it, and then how they sometimes go on to be abusers, and just reading about the systemic issue that we have here, and what are our solutions that we can provide as a country? We need to do better.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating and terrible, and hopefully can be a conversation we can continue after this.
Absolutely. And to your point, Kendall, that's exactly why we're bringing this conversation to my talk today, is because the first step to bringing something out of the dark is talking about it in the light.
Yeah.
And bringing it into a public conversation in a public forum, and saying words that we typically don't say out loud. This truly is a way to start to end that stigma.
Yeah.
And we're gonna be guided through this conversation with a bunch of wonderful guests who are very qualified to take us on this journey. I did want to mention one more thing, because I did say earlier, and then I didn't finish the thought, that the reason we do these My Talk roundtables is because there is typically some sort of pop culture reference that might make us think it's time to go a little bit deeper on a topic. But this is not only a pop culture reference. This is also in the news today. So maybe some people have heard, and if you have not, please do look into it more about Olympic distance runner Rebecca. I think it's pronounced Cheptegei, who died at the hands of her boyfriend in an attack that happened on Sunday. And she was just in the Paris Olympics. So this is another reason these headlines are coming up, and they're present right now, and they're present in big ways, but domestic violence is pervasive in many ways, not
ways,
in so many ways that don't show up in headlines. And that's why we're here today. That's why we're having these conversations. Here's what to expect. Here's what to expect going forward today during our My Talk Roundtable. Brittany and Kendall are going to get back to your regular antics a little bit later in the show, but in the program. But for the next hour and a half, we are going to be joined by, like I said, very, very intelligent and very qualified guests. We're in the next segment going to be joined by Justin Baldoni. He produced, directed, and starred in It Ends With Us. He's, among so many other things, an actor, a director, a producer, a New York Times bestselling author. He's a podcaster. He is the owner of a production company, which is who produced this It Ends With Us. So he is here to talk about his role in the film, what he has learned, why he was passionate about this film, what he has learned and knows about domestic violence as a result of that. We're also joined by two people who advised him on this film from an organization called No More. Pamela Zaballa is going to be joining us in the next segment, as well as Jane Randel. Pamela is the global CEO of No More, and Jane Randel is the co-founder of No More. It's going to be a full house, having a very important conversation about domestic violence on this roundtable. Welcome back to the My Talk Roundtable on domestic violence. I am Colleen Lindstrom, former host here at My Talk. I still hang out every once in a while. And I'm so glad to be joining my friends Brittany and Kendall as we have this really important roundtable about domestic violence that was prompted truly by a movie that is in theaters right now, based on a book by Colleen Hoover. And it's called It Ends With Us. And we are so excited and so honored and so thrilled to invite to the show the producer, director, and starring, the star. I'm going to say that, of It Ends With Us, Justin Baldoni. Justin, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi. So nice to meet you all.
We're just honored to have you here, and so glad that you're here to help us kind of navigate this discussion. I also want to introduce our other guests. From No More, we have Pamela Zaballa, the global CEO, and Jane Randel. Am I saying that correct, Jane? Jane Randel?
Correct. Yep.
Who's the co-founder of No More. And No More took on an advisory role on It Ends With Us. And that is why you all are joining us. We're so grateful to all of you today. Thank you.
Hi, Jane.
Justin,
Hi.
a little family reunion over there. I wanted to start with a question. This one, I want to actually make this kind of an all play. So for everybody, because I've noticed something in myself that I wanted to check in with. I use the terms domestic violence and domestic abuse interchangeably. And I'm wondering if there's a difference, or if there's a reason we should be using one more than the other. And I'm sorry if that came out of left field, but I always feel like if I have a question, other people have a question as well.
I'm going to jump on that one.
Please.
And yes, it's actually a very good question. So it actually is such a kind of a concern in a way that some countries prefer to call it domestic violence. In the States is what the term that we kind of use the most. But other countries have changed their legislation, like the UK, to call it domestic abuse. The main difference between both of them is that with domestic violence, there is this kind of assumption in a way that physical abuse, or there's some kind of physicality is happening. And domestic abuse tries to bring together all the other factors that are in play within a relationship, right? Which might not be physical, might just be emotional, financial. So that's where other countries are kind of moving. And you can see now that many more people are using the term domestic abuse. So, it is the most complete of both terms, I must say. So I incline towards it.
Thank you for that. That actually was very helpful. I'm also going to make this one an all play. Justin,
So much better when they're all play, by the way.
I know, right? We just make it a community.
You couldn't have anyone better on your show than Jane and Pamela, and they are instrumental in why the movie is the way that it is and why it is so successful and why it's changing lives. So
Yeah.
please make as many of these all play as you possibly can.
Well, so to that end, I mean, the question I have is that one of the things that was so apparent and meaningful to me in watching the movie is the way that the violence was portrayed in such a way that it puts the viewer in the shoes of Lily and wondering if what happened actually happened in the way that it happened. Until it kind of becomes clear after a collection of events. And so I'm wondering if, Justin, from a director's standpoint, if you can talk a little bit more about that choice. And then also Pamela and Jane, if you can talk about how that actually mimics the reality of domestic violence in relationships.
It's a great question. And something that I've been so blown away to receive feedback on from so many survivors. I didn't expect actually how many people would come out of the woodwork that I knew personally and tell me about their experiences. Also men coming out and sharing that they grew up in homes similar to this, and the movie helped them start to remember some of these things. So to answer your question, it was an intentional choice. Christy Hall, our amazing writer, and I were developing this film, and turning this from a book into a movie was really challenging, because anytime you're taking a beloved property like a book, where you have a lot of real estate, right? You have 400 pages.
Yeah.
You have the benefit of internal dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Example, right? So when you read the book, you're in Lily's mind. So she might be looking at Ryle, but we're hearing what she says about how she feels about him. And so we're painting this picture, and we're given the head start of an internal monologue. But the other thing that happens is that you fall in love with the characters, you fall in love with the situations that they're in. But not everything can transfer from book to screen. And one of the things that we were talking about very early on was, how could we design a film where you don't judge the main character for staying the way that so many women are judged for staying? Mm-hmm. And that was my intention from the very beginning, is, okay, I didn't know how to take the book and just turn it into a movie.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, if we put an audience in that situation without the benefit of Lily's internal monologue, then the audience would be judging Lily. And the purpose of the film is so that we can stop asking the question, why women stay. That's the literal reason to make this movie, is to have a piece of art that you go and you view, and then whoever sees that film never will ever ask that question ever again. Mm-hmm. Right? And the question will be flipped to, why do men hurt? Why are we letting men hurt these women? Why are femicides happening all over the world at alarming rates? So, backing it up, because we're in radio now, so I can give not just like 3-second answers the way that I've been doing for the last month. There was no way we could figure out the puzzle pieces to have any instance of violence or abuse happen where it needed to happen in the movie without us wanting Lily to leave the situation, run for the hills, and go to Atlas. And the movie hinges on the complexity of this relationship and the strange, almost gaslighting situation that we're intentionally putting the audience into, to figure out at the end why they are kind of wanting her to stay with him, and if she's going to stay with him. And if we're not at all leaning into the relationship with her and Ryle before she asks for a divorce, the movie doesn't work. So it was very confusing. every way we tried to put the pieces of the puzzle together, we found ourselves in the same place, which was like, but that won't work because the audience is going to be like, just leave. He clearly hit you. And we couldn't tell the entire backstory because that dilutes the whole purpose of the front of the movie. And you're in this is about Lily's journey and her arc. So I was having a conversation with Christy Hall, and the reality was I had been doing some very deep therapy about some trauma in my life that I had written about in one of my books. And I had noticed how the memories were starting to come back for me and how they were blurry and that they were fuzzy, and I was justifying. And then in my conversations with Jay and Pamela, and I asked them, is this something that happens to survivors? They started talking to me about that and how prevalent it was and how confusing it is because you start to justify these situations and rationalize your way out of them. And then you find yourself staying in situations you should never stay in. So I've always described this film like a frog in boiling water. You're a frog and you're slowly turning up the temperature of the water until the point where you don't even realize you're boiling. And so I pitched that to Christy and I said, well, what if the first few instances of abuse were blurry? What if we didn't exactly know what happened? What if we shot them in such a way that we almost leaned into the fact that they were accidents? Because the intention was that this movie, the whole first half of this movie, we are in Lily's POV and we don't realize it. We're in her point of view. Sorry for this is movie talk.
Yeah.
We're in her point of view. So the audience is Lily, but we don't know that. We just think we're watching an objective film, but in reality, she is an unreliable narrator. And the story that she's telling herself is not true until the audience realizes that Lily and the audience are in the exact same situation where they can no longer run from the truth, that Ryle is in fact abusive and she needs to get out of there fast. That's the moment that the movie completely turns. And that happens, of course, in the scene on the couch. And from that point on, we are watching an objective movie and we are no longer in Lily's mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to say you did that strikingly well because as a viewer, without even knowing all that went into that, that's the experience that I was having, and so it truly does it does come across. Pamela and Jane, do you have any sort of anything to add to that in terms of how you saw it and how you advised on that?
Well, Justin from the beginning was very, very intentional about wanting to make sure that the domestic violence was portrayed, I hate to say the word accurately because it's every situation is different, but as sensitively as possible and as realistically as possible. So that's what you're seeing. I go back to Pamela's comment about abuse versus violence. There are people who will go to that movie even before there's actual violence and realize that they're in a violent relationship or in an abusive relationship. There are times where you can do presentations to just a random audience and you're talking about financial abuse or psychological abuse or any other kind of sort of control, power and control, and they will realize that that's them. So it's not exactly the same situation that is portrayed on the screen in terms of the violence, but it is very much the same as this sort of light bulb going, this is not right.
I guess that what I would add to that is that book first, and that's why the book was again a big success, and the movie captures really well is this falling in love with Ryle. You're rooting for him.
Yeah.
In both, like you want this to work. You as you want this kind of love in a way to succeed because that's how you're feeling. You are experimenting it from her side, like the way we've all fallen in love. And when we don't talk too much about domestic abuse and love, but that's really how it starts, right? You trust somebody, you love them deeply enough to care so much to stay, and that is a trap, right? You love Ryle, you love him from the moment that you see him. You are rooting. He is the good guy. He's the perfect guy. Like, surely something is wrong, right? And so that is, and I think that is where the movie has succeeded, is in making people think a bit more and not just portraying physical violence for the sake of it, is to show how we all fall in the trap We fall in our own relationships, and sometimes we fall in the relationships of others, our friends. Perpetrators charm. They charm your
Very.
family members. They charm. You have sometimes people that will say, "Are you sure he did that? Are you sure?" You must be imagining that. So, yes, I think that's where the secret sauces of the story, and Justin's team captured that really, really well.
Just think about how Ryle interacted with Lily's mother, right?
Yeah.
When we first met her, right? This big, very charming guy.
Charming. Well, and it does speak to how, when love is present, we want love to prevail. That is just kind of a cultural, that's just sort of a cultural normative. And so you certainly can see, I want to continue on this trajectory, and we do need to take a quick break. But when we come back, for those who are just tuning in, this is a My Talk Roundtable. We are talking about domestic violence with the director, producer, and star of It Ends With Us, Justin Baldoni, along with two advisors from No More who advised on the film, Pamela Zaballa, who is the global CEO, and Jane Randel, who is the co-founder of No More. When we come back, we will continue this very important conversation on My Talk 1071. Welcome back to the My Talk Roundtable. We're talking about domestic violence on My Talk 1071 today. Again, a roundtable is kind of a thing that we made up here on My Talk 1071 when there is a need, because of a pop culture reference or something in the news, to go a little bit deeper on the topics that we usually kind of stay a little shallow on. So I'm Colleen Lindstrom, a former host here at My Talk, a current #1 fan and regular fill-in, and here with Brittany and Kendall, who usually inhabit this regular time slot. And we're so lucky also to be joined by some wonderful guests. We have Justin Baldoni. You know him because he is the producer, director, and star of It Ends With Us. But also, listen, I got to tell you something, Justin. I have a 1-page bio of you, and I would love to read the whole thing. I'm not going to. But you are, truly decorated, a best-selling author, podcaster, among so many other things. And so we're fortunate to have you here talking truly about the process and what you learned through the production of It Ends With Us. But also we are joined by Pamela Zaballa, who's the global CEO of No More, and Jane Randel, the co-founder of No More, which is a foundation dedicated to ending domestic and sexual violence by increasing awareness, which is part of what we're trying to do right here, inspiring action and fueling culture change. And Kendall, I know you had some things that you wanted to kind of get to.
Yeah, Justin, I actually listened to your Man Enough podcast where you specifically had Pamela and Jane on. And I thought at one point you brought up a really interesting point, all three of you did, and your co-host, about love. And we sort of ended the last segment, Pamela, with you. So I want to start this one with you. It is the root of every relationship, love. And you kind of overlook so many things. And then maybe because of that love, things turn into a violent way that maybe they wouldn't have before. Can you speak on things that you had said before about what to look for? There are sometimes, like you talked about love bombing specifically.
Yeah.
Is someone just in love with you? Or are they love bombing me and it's turning into something that could be a dangerous cycle?
It really boils down to the intensity of how it's happening, right? A stable relationship, a healthy relationship needs to grow with time. If it's something that, will fulfill your life, are you that person that will allow that person to grow? Will that person grow with you? But if all of a sudden, it's just an unlimited amount of affection, a too good to be true kind of scenario. If you think about Ryle, for example, just as an example, it seems like he had problems with every relationship before, but Lily was the one.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This was a man in his early 30s. Like, what happened all of those years, before? So there are things that don't start adding up, and some of your friends, family, and other people around you might actually put those one to one together. So again, are you having some friends or family that are actually telling you this might not be right and you're not listening? I guess also is very important. You're in love with somebody, but are they starting to make comments to you about, oh, you look amazing, but that doesn't, suit you that well? and you go and change your clothes? Are you starting to cave into some behaviors to please somebody? And so I guess that this is where it starts. It might all seem too romantic. And again, this idea of romanticism, you were absolutely right, Clem, when we were talking about this, right? Romance lives in our lives since we're like, children. And therefore you're fulfilling almost that destiny. So you have to get to know yourself. That's the other very important thing. And why and how are you entering into relationships, right? Making sure that you're giving your own time, that you're there because you're going to be there for somebody too. So yes, there's a host of
I,
signals really for this.
I want to add one other thing, and it's something that people don't do enough, which is just trust your gut, right? People so often, whether it's with a friend that you see in a relationship that just something doesn't feel right, or it's yourself, people sort of err in the opposite direction as opposed to trusting what they feel. Because you know what, if you feel it's wrong or something's not quite right, you're probably correct. There probably is something going on, and that's something we really should teach ourselves, but certainly the young people in our lives, right? To trust your gut, because your gut very rarely leads you wrong.
Absolutely.
Just
No,
real
go ahead,
quick,
Justin.
because we've spoken about this maybe privately, and I just want you guys to maybe go into it a little bit more if you can, because it's helped me. There's also the difference between, love bombing, and somebody who is genuinely in love, and there's this, they just want to show their love, and it comes back to what you were saying, Wayne, which is like, well, what does this feel like? Are they listening to my cues? Am I actually liking what they're doing? Am I asking them to slow down? Are they listening? Are they paying attention? Or are they just bombing me with it? And you guys have talked a little bit about that as well, and it does tie back to what you were just saying, like how do I feel about what's happening? Forget about what everyone else feels about it. There's like the knight in shining armor part of it, but like, how do I feel about that? I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Well, just one thing I want to say is that when you see the film more than once, you really see the red flags pretty clearly in the relationship early on, right? It's just interesting, you see it once and you sort of romanticize it, and then maybe you're surprised. But if you see it again, I think that the red flags, whether you put them there or not, Justin, they're quite evident.
Yeah, they're put there.
When you see that red flag as someone who's a friend or an outsider perspective, even, we just talked about when you maybe see it for yourself, but when you see it, how do you approach that? What would your advice be, Jane? If I see it, my girlfriend, I see these red flags going off like I would see it with Lily in this film. What do you say?
Right. Like, do you address it head on?
Right.
What words do you use?
I think you have to be gentle, but persistent. You start to say something doesn't feel right. Are you okay? You just sort of express the fact that you're there. Often if you go in too directly and people are going to push back. They have to get there themselves. It's one of you saw it with Lily, right? She had to get there herself. If Alyssa had said something, she wouldn't have believed her anyway. Or Atlas did say something and she didn't believe them. And so it's just a matter of starting to reach out and let someone know you're there. Pamela, do you want to add?
Yes, I think the most important is letting them know what your thoughts are. So being honest, but at the end, just, making them aware that the door is open, that at any point they can come, at any point they can tell you, what's happening if things change. Because part of the problem with leaving a relationship many times is that people just feel like they've loved this person, but then they're going to be judged, to step out because maybe they had friends already warning, right? So making sure that, you've made that comment, but if she comes back because she thinks that's true, she won't be judged. And I think that's really, really important.
And I think, Justin, in the movie, just quickly, in the movie, you do a great job, right, of not judging Lily for making that decision. In fact, applauding Lily for making that decision. And I think that's helpful because one of the first things we tell people is listen without judgment, which means, but he's such a great guy, but he's a neurosurgeon, but. Sorry, Justin.
No. I was just going to add something that I learned from survivors that Jane and Pamela had introduced me to also. And again, you guys should speak more. I'm just the filmmaker who you guys are experts and you deal with this every day. But if this can tee you both up to talking about it, which something that I learned was that abusers, and I'm just going to just call them general abusers, people who abuse, also tend to try to isolate their victim. So as a friend, the stories that I heard, anytime the friend can stay in close contact, that is, even if they're watching it happen and they're letting them know they're there, from what I learned, is really important, because then the door is still open always. And if someone comes in and says, I see what's happening, you have to leave him, and then the friendship blows up, no, I'm not going to leave, and they're not talking anymore, they might not think the door is open. So some of the stories that I heard where women were able to actually get out of these relationships happened because their friends were playing the long game, not judging them for staying, and just continually, like Pamela was saying, like calling and letting them know they're here. Is there anything you want to tell me? I'm witnessing some things, because the goal of so many of these people is to isolate the victim.
I think you touch on a very important point, which is, be patient, because sometimes you just want your best friend to hear you, like grab them and like, you'll never see this person again. And that's it. But no, you can't, because that person is going through their pathway. They're trying to understand what's happening, right? And they have lived the good experiences with that person. Right. And I think that's a little bit of respect, right? In the sense that you might be getting this feeling, you might even know already that there's an incident, but this person is trying to really justify that, she's had good moments, that this person, that they're great, and they're trying to bet on that possibility. Because when we fall in love, we bet on it, right? We try to make it work. So yes, being patient and listening without judgment, that's what I would recommend, friends. It's easier said than done for every friend out there who's finding themselves in that situation.
But one comment, interestingly, sorry, really quickly, that
you're good.
That Kimia Motley, who was on your podcast and is a survivor, made was that she really appreciated that the movie showed love and that not every moment was bad, right? That you saw it was sporadic, because it's realistic, right? Not everything is bad. And she herself, who was in a horrific relationship, really, it was just so interesting. She was so appreciative of that. It was just a great example of how seriously the filmmakers and Justin took making this as realistic as possible.
Jane, you just teed me up beautifully for what we call a tease in the business, because we're going to take a break here. But the word that keeps on coming up that I've noticed in the last 3 segments is the word love. We keep on talking about the love in the relationship, and we talk about how love might feel different. And when we talk about how the cycle repeats, it can be easy to believe that love is not part of that equation, but there is a belief of love always in a relationship, often when this is present. So when we come back, I'd like to talk a little bit about how the cycle repeats. And there is a repetitive cycle in the movie. It ends with us. Lily watched violence to her mother from her own father. And so I'd like to kind of touch on that when we come back on this roundtable discussion on My Talk 107.1. We're talking about the movie It Ends With Us and domestic violence as it was portrayed in the movie. And we are joined by Justin Baldoni, producer, director, and star of This Is It Ends With Us. Sorry, did I say This Is Us? Somebody wrote something wrong here. Not my fault. This is us talking about It Ends With Us. Justin Baldoni is here with us, and Pamela Zaballa and Jane Randel, both from No More, a foundation dedicated to ending domestic and sexual violence by increasing awareness, which is exactly what we are doing right here on this roundtable, and we will continue to do when we come back on My Talk 107.
Discussion. We are so blessed and lucky to be with Justin Baldoni, the producer, the director, and actor with Ends With Us. We have the global CEO from No More, Pamela, and the co-founder from No More, Jane. Thank you guys so much for being with us today. I had a question, and I was so thankful that both book and movie dealt with the idea of a child being brought into this relationship. And it really had me asking the question, was a child something that extends the relationship, or maybe in Lily's case, has them looking at it kind of objectively?
I mean, that is an excellent question. I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to pass, this to Justin, because there's obviously a lot of discussions. The book and the movie are different in the way they end. And I think that's really important. You start seeing in the book a bit of a kind of a co-parenting relationship, and you really don't know. You get a good feeling of how they depart, but you don't really know what that relationship would look like. The reality for domestic violence, survivors, is that co-parenting can become really, really difficult. All the process around custody, visitation are more often than not, weaponized against them. So it is very difficult. The kind of the violence that maybe was present carries on in another form, whilst the separation is. And we know the separation is already very dangerous, but actually, visitation and all of that, it's really, really hard. And it's, it's something the system also has not found a way to make it really safe for survivors, in a way that, we would be pleased. A lot of homicides happen. For example, at that time, a lot of young children are murdered sometimes, in visitation. So there is, there is a lot about that. But that's my. But I guess, Justin, because we had this conversation multiple times, didn't we, about how this could, end, and how this, and I think it was done brilliantly at the end from the team.
Yeah, it was very challenging. Because we wanted to honor the book. Colleen wrote a beautiful book from personal experience. And
not me, Colleen Hoover. I just want anybody who's confused to know, not me. But it's true. It was a beautiful book.
And yet when it's that challenge we talked about earlier. When you're bringing the text to the screen, there are some things that don't work. And so one of the things that Pamela and Jane and I, the three of us, had these kind of brain maps, these long sessions just talking about, well, how does this work? We were just trying to figure out, well, what would Ryle have to do in between when we see him hurt her and we realize what's happening and we can no longer run from it, to the point where we see him co-parenting? What would he have to do to justify Lily's choice in allowing him to co-parent? Mm-hmm. And so we tried adding lines here and a line there and a scene here and a scene there, where we were, we even at one point we were layering in to the scene where he shows up and he's helping Lily with the crib, that he's been in therapy and he's been in anger management. Like, we were trying all of these things, and no matter what we did, it didn't feel right. And right before we shot, we had taken a break. We had a writer's strike and an actor's strike in the middle of this movie. So it was a very challenging production. Mm. And I had a chance to put together the film over this hiatus. And when I came back, just before we shot, I just kept feeling like, I don't think we should shoot this co-parenting scene. There was just not a way that I felt comfortable making it work. And every way we tried, and Jane and Pamela tried, because they were also, they wanted to protect the movie and the book, but also their job was to really help me make sure we were doing justice to. Mm-hmm. So we just couldn't figure it out, and it would have opened too many questions. And I didn't want to have such an amazing, powerful film be drowned out by noise around the decision to see them parenting. So, as I was editing the scene in the where Ryle says goodbye and the divorce happens, and he closes the door, I just had this feeling, and this is the last time we should see him. The door should close, and we don't need to see Ryle again. Wow. Now, that's not to say in another universe, if there was another story and it continued to happen, that they're not co-parenting, but we just don't have the space in this film to show how it's happening, why it's happening, and what work he's doing to justify that it's happening, because we spent the whole movie protecting Lily, and I don't want to just blow it at the end. So that was the decision to not see Ryle afterwards. And we know he's in the second book. But for the movie, it just needed to be wrapped up in a bow, and he's done. It's about Lily at this point.
And it's so interesting, Justin, when you're talking about that, in a movie, the story the story ends and we go home and we think about it. But life doesn't operate in that way. Right. And so that's the way that story lives on in us is the way that we continue to think about it. And our boss here at the radio station, she just saw it last night. She said she can't stop thinking about it. And I think that is a very, very typical experience that people have after seeing It Ends With Us. But in real life, the story does go on. In real life, relationships do continue. People still are in your life because of a child, maybe, or another connection or a relationship. And that's the reality. And I do appreciate, in terms of the storytelling, what a big choice to make, and so true. And like you said, there's a whole story that's going on. That's like a whole other film that is made in a different dimension. But
in reality, it would have been romanticizing.
Yeah.
And we really fought hard to make sure that the critics of the book, the survivors who were not happy with some parts of the book, were heard, because they have a right to be heard.
Absolutely.
And the reality is that it's very dangerous to co-parent. Somebody that is willing to hurt the person they love the most is not stable. And so many women are in that situation every day. So many women are in that situation every day. And I know, Pamela and I and Jane have spoken a lot about this, but I would love, Pamela, can I tee you up with something?
Of course. Go ahead.
It's something that very early, Brittany and Kendall and Colleen, that really struck me was early on in our development process. Pamela was explaining to me how many women don't make the choice Lily makes at the end, and why. And it doesn't make them weak, and it doesn't mean that they should be judged. There's reasons for it. And I don't know if there's a way that I could just tee you up to just chat, because it was so helpful for me as I was starting this process to understand the psychology.
No, we saw it in the same story. Lily's mom doesn't make that choice.
Right.
And there is a whole host of reasons. A lot of people endure many, many, many years and never end up leaving. And the reasons are multiple, right? It could be just your faith that you should bring your children in a family, that they should have a father. Maybe you didn't have a father, so you're going to do everything that is possibly human to have a child for your father. So there are, again, many personal other reasons. It could be financial. It could be your religion. There is, so much to it. The love that you feel for other person that actually might wane out with the years, but you have a family to sustain. It is, again, I always ask people to make lists. I think we had this conversation about what do you make when you leave a relationship? What do you, and you get freedom, stability, and there are all of these intangible things that are great that, survivors need but actually you might be losing your home, your bed, where your children are going, their school, their clothes, everything. And you might have to lose it because your life might be at risk. And that's why many survivors like Lily make that ultimate decision, but it's not an easy. And I think that's right. Right?
Pamela, I'm sorry.
Whatever decision sorry, I keep interrupting everybody.
No, it's fine.
For their kid, parent, whatever decision they make, they're making it on behalf of, for their kid, right? Yeah. Whether it's to stay, to keep whatever stability they feel that they have, whether it's to leave, it's very much about, so many times parents go to great lengths to protect their children from what's happening. But the kids always know, Lily knew, they always know.
Jane and Pamela, Justin, the three of you just teed up so beautifully. It was like we choreographed it for our next conversation here on the My Talk Roundtable, because we will be saying goodbye to the three of you. Don't move yet. And saying hello to Jen Polzin from Tubman, which is a local organization. And part of what they do is help with those exact transitions that you're talking about. So that's what's coming up on the My Talk Roundtable. But before we go, I just want to say thank you, truly, from the bottom of my heart, not just for being here with us today, but for telling this story in such a real and an impactful way that actually put people in a position of compassion. Just by the telling of the story, it put the viewer into a position of compassion and maybe choosing to understand something they may not understand in a different way. And so on behalf of us here at My Talk, and I would imagine of many victims of domestic violence, truly cannot thank you enough for the time, thought, energy you put into the telling of the story. It Ends With Us. Justin Baldoni, director, star, producer of It Ends With Us, Jane Randel, co-founder of No More, and Pamela Zaballa. I want to make sure, who's the global CEO of No More, that you can you tell people the website to No More so that they can do their own research, learn more about the organization, ways that they can be involved further?
Please visit nomore.org. You're going to get a host of resources, resources that came with the movie. Very important to get those, to read them. And last thing, I always tell people, you might not be in a situation like this, but inform yourself so you're prepared when a friend, when a colleague in your office, when a stranger tells you that they're going through this.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you all so very much.
Thank
you all so
Thank
much.
you.
Such a pleasure to be here.
And this is an opportunity for us to take a deeper dive on something that is sort of in pop culture, in entertainment. That's what we traffic, and that's what we talk about here on My Talk 1071. I'm Colleen Lindstrom. I still am around. Brittany and
You
Kendall.
are a host. Quit demoting yourself.
Oh, it's fine.
You are a host here at My Talk 1071. Colleen, round of applause. It's been awesome to have you here on the Brittany and Kendall
thank
show.
you.
And we've been really blessed to have Justin Baldoni for another segment. Thank you so much, Justin, for staying.
That was my bad. I was like, bye, Justin, but then you're still here. So thank you. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here.
I was a little confused for a second, but I'm happy to stay because I wasn't sure. I was about to
Listen, I'm a little rusty at the microphone, so it's my bad. But here we are, and what we wanted to talk about, Brittany and Kendall and I talked a little bit in the break about the choice to take on a role like Ryle. So we're talking about the movie It Ends With Us, and your character of Ryle. So not only were you the star of the movie in the character of Ryle, but you also produced and directed the movie. And the character of Ryle truly does embody all the things that we talked about. Somebody who seems too good to be true. There's a lot to love about Ryle, but there's also the red flags. And then he is the perpetrator of violence on the woman he loves. And so how is it to take that role?
Right. I mentioned, Justin, that I listened to your podcast, Man Enough, and you address this by something that I had not heard. I hadn't read your book, and you'd said, like, hey, I've been only on the outside perspective. I've never been the abuser. I've just seen it from the other side. That's got to be a gut-wrenching thing to go, okay, not how am I going to be this person? Did you really have to look at Jane and Pamela to say, I want to make sure I'm doing this justice?
Oh, that was the only way that I was able to do it from the beginning. I wrestled with this a lot because, I didn't want to ever do something that could hurt the chance of this film having the impact that I just had this gut feeling that it could have from the very beginning. So at any given point in time, I was willing to step off as a director or an actor. And yet there was something that just kept calling me to do it. And I was in this rare position where my company controlled the rights long before it was a big hit. At the time, Colleen had, emailed me and suggested that I play Ryle. And so here I was just like, can I do this? Should I do this? I just didn't want to hurt the film. That was always my, it's like, I don't want to do anything that can hurt the potential for this movie to have impact. Because from the very beginning, it was, how can we create an experience where that one person in the audience can realize that she is Lily
Yes.
and maybe make a different choice. So that was the intention from the beginning. So me putting myself in this movie was terrifying to me because I didn't want to hurt that. So when the time came, I said to Jane and Pamela, I need your help. I don't know. I don't want to play this character in a one-dimensional way. I don't want to play him like a villain. I don't want to play him. I want to play him in a way where women can feel like they know this person in their abuser, or in that ex-boyfriend, or in their father, or in their current husband. And so how do I do that? And so we talked and we talked and we talked. I met with survivors. I talked to the women in my life. Far too many of them have been in situations like this. And something that was very helpful for me, both as a filmmaker, but also as an actor, was Jane and Pamela invited me in to basically listen to a court-mandated group for perpetrators. And I got to be a fly on the wall and kind of be in these Zoom meetings where these men who had done significant harm to women and people in their life were being held accountable by a mediator and by each other. And that was really helpful for me also to understand the psychology of these men. So it was all of it. It was very hard. It was confusing. And I just wanted it to be honest. That was what I kept talking to my wife about. I just want it to be honest. I don't want to ever feel like I'm acting. And if the person ever feels like I'm acting, then they're taken out of the situation, they're taken out of the movie, and it's not going to touch their heart as much. And that was for me the biggest challenge. Can I portray this authentically?
You had these huge, lofty. Oh, I'm sorry. You cut out for a second. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Okay. You
Yeah.
had these huge, lofty goals. We're talking with Justin Baldoni, the producer, director, and actor of It Ends With Us. You teamed up with No More, a foundation that's dedicated to ending domestic and sexual violence by increasing awareness, inspiring action, and fueling culture. I want to know, Justin, around here, I would say these lofty goals, when I look at people who've seen it, have been accomplished. But what is the feedback you've received from this movie coming out?
I mean, I had the chills. You asked me the question, like I get goosebumps all over my. It is. Here's the reality of it. It's confusing because we're balancing a few things. We're balancing the success of the movie and my metric for success from the beginning, which is women seeing themselves on screen, saying it ends with me, leaving relationships, friends bringing their friend who is in a situation like Lily into the theater, conversations happening, men recognizing their own patterns. I'm overwhelmed by the amount of people in my own life who have reached out to me, unbeknownst to me, who have been in situations like Lily. So on one hand, I've been moved to tears multiple days and nights reading messages from people that I love dearly, like close friends. And on the other, the reality that they're in is heartbreaking and it's hard to celebrate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the juxtaposition of those two things.
Because I approach it, and I have approached it like a nonprofit. And the whole point of a nonprofit is that the goal is that in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, the nonprofit doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very strange when you mix a film, which of course you want to have commercial success because everyone benefits from it. I benefit from it individually. My ego can benefit from it. All of the superficial parts of me and my company benefit from it. And then the reality of it is the why behind why we make it is to have that impact. And the fact that it's having so much impact or that so many people are being seen is just conflicting because it makes me want to double down and say, oh, well, this can't, it ends with us. It can't just end here. There has to, much more has to be done. This can't just be a movie that gets released in time and then like everybody moves on and it's like, okay, well, we did some good. This is a it is a endemic, uh, persistent. It's everywhere. It's an issue it's everywhere. Femicides are growing around the world. Men are not being held accountable in the way that they need to. And this is an issue that just one movie isn't going to fix. So that's what I'm trying to explain in my jumbled up words. It's like, it's amazing. The movie's had tons of success. People are feeling seen. They're leaving their relationships, and I'm kind of left in this strange feeling of like, wow, it's working, and I'm heartbroken that it's working.
Yeah.
Way worse than I thought it was.
Right.
I have
Like,
friends reaching out to me saying,
yeah.
like, they were in this situation and they never told me.
Yeah. Like the shame of the like, it's a shame that this movie had to happen to start conversations to begin with. And yet at the same time, it is starting these conversations. We're here having one right now and holding that all together.
It's
yeah.
beautiful. It's just a strange position to be in. And when I tell all my actors this, when I direct a scene and when we're looking at a scene, what makes a scene interesting in a film is that there's two opposing truths happening at the same time. And it's the friction of those truths that creates an amazing scene. And the reality of our situation right now is the two truths are that this movie needed to exist, and also I wish it didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have to do more. And that's why we partnered with No More from the beginning. That's why they're doing incredible work over there. I know you're about to have somebody on who's doing work locally. And that's the whole point of making art. You know, in our business, we always say like, oh, well, we're not saving lives. We're not curing cancer. Like, it's just a movie. And I've always, kind of joked to these people that say this, well, maybe we're making the wrong movies. Because what if we could? And that was what was so important about the book, is that it did save lives. It did make a difference. And this movie could do the same thing, and it is doing the same thing. And that's why, when my good friend Dan Seaman reached out and asked me to come and talk to you three, I said, absolutely, because this is what it's about. This is the type of press that we should be doing. This is all of the conversations that should be surrounding this film, is how can people feel seen? How can we help men not become riled? How can we help the women that are in the situation like Lily get help and get out? Nothing else matters.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, before we say goodbye, Justin, I do want to ask you, because like you said earlier, in a junket, you get typically like 60 seconds or less to answer any question or to say anything. And I just don't want you to feel like you've left anything unsaid in this forum, because that's why we're here, to give you that opportunity to truly leave it all out there. And so if there's anything that you want to share, I know that just puts you right on the spot, right? Because your brain is probably like a little hamster wheel trying to come up with something. But I want you to know that this is a space where we want you to be able to say what you have to say, what you want to say, what needs to be said.
Oh, that's so sweet. I feel like we've done that. I think that Jane and Pamela added so much to the conversation, and thank you for letting them join me. Here's what I'll say, and it's not exactly this film related, but it's very sweet. When I was approached to be on your show, and as you can imagine, there's been an influx of media requests. Dan reached out, and my career started when I started telling stories that moved my soul, because I wanted other people's souls to be moved. And one of those stories was Zach Sobiak, whose documentary I made over 11 years ago, right there in your hometown. Still very close to his family. Shout out to Laura and Rob and Amy and Sammy and everybody. And it was the telling of Zach's story that really, I believe, kind of ignited my career and what I wanted to do with my life. So when Dan reached out, it was almost an immediate yes, but I had to, of course, clear it with all the publicists and everything. Now, for anybody who's familiar with Zach's story, at the end of the film that I made a movie called Clouds, which you can rent on video on demand. It was on Disney for a few years. But at the end of the film, there's a Z, because that's how he let everybody know that he was okay. There was a Z in the clouds. And this was a real Z that happened when his friends Amy and Sammy took a picture one day. So Dan asked me to be on the show. I go out and I'm having a conversation with my wife, and I look up and there's a Z in the cloud. And I mean, this was like
You couldn't deny it. It
Clear
was
as
a
day.
Z.
it was a, we used CGI to create the Z in the movie. This was like a CGI Z. And it was, and I was like, oh, Zach wants me to do this. Absolutely. And I only say that because it is a confirmation that I am sure that there is somebody listening right now who needs to hear this conversation that you three are facilitating, because this is what's important. And so that's why I'm all in when these types of things happen, because the conversations that you three are having right now, you are using what you do beautifully, which is your art, your platform, to make a difference in somebody's life. And that is the most noble form of art.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I just want to say thank you three for having this conversation and for wanting to talk about the things that matter and the reasons we made the movie, because that's more important than anything else.
That's how truer words could not be spoken. Justin Baldoni, it has been a true pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for taking so much time with us, and also for what you've brought, to the screen, for what you've brought to our lives, what you've brought to these hours. You're welcome to stay if you'd like, but I know you're a busy guy.
I'm actually on vacation with my family.
Well, get vacationing.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
we should
fun.
do that.
Get out there and do it.
I'm on,
Justin.
but thank you all so much. And I just want to say, and this was a group of, I accept the thank you, but there were so many people who poured their hearts and their souls into this film.
Yeah.
And this, number one, this wouldn't have happened without Colleen giving me the blessing. The actors were amazing. Blake was incredible in this film. And my writer, Christy Hall, our producers, like, everybody was on board with the why behind this movie. So this was a collective we effort, with hundreds and hundreds of people that never get named or get noticed when they make art like this. And so to any of them that are listening, I just want to say thank you, because people put their hearts and their souls into this film.
Well, we thank them as well. And to you, Justin Baldoni, thank you so much for spending this time with us here on My Talk 107.1.
Thank you so much.
Be well. Be
All right.
well.
Bye, everybody.
When we come to the My Talk roundtable on My Talk 107.1, we're talking about domestic violence here on My Talk 107.1 today. So one of the reasons why we started doing these roundtables so many years ago, and by the way, I'm Colleen Lindstrom.
Brittany, doing an excellent job leading the team.
Oh, thank you, Kendall. Thanks for letting me squat on your show. That didn't sound good. Brittany is actually going to be right back, but Brittany is also here with us, and we are welcoming a guest in just a moment, and I'm gonna tell you all about her. But one of the reasons why we started doing these roundtables so many years ago was because there are just times we talk about entertainment, we talk about pop culture,
goofy things,
Hollywood gossip, all the things. And then there are moments when we are served up an opportunity to go a little bit deeper on something that really, truly does matter. And this was an opportunity. Justin Baldoni was so gracious to spend time with us, to bring on two members of the organization No More to talk about what went into the production of It Ends With Us, and how we and how they made the movie, and how they kept it very true to the story.
They were integral in really helping create the movie with him. Truly.
Mm-hmm. And so then this unfolded, and an organization that's been very close to My Talk has been part of more than one project down and dirty, is our friends at Tubman. And Jen Polzin from Tubman, local organization, CEO, is here to join us to go a little bit deeper and even a little bit more personal on this topic of domestic violence. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
We're so happy to have you. And I don't want to assume that everybody knows what Tubman is just because Tubman is right here in our backyard. So can you give us just sort of an elevator speech? It can be longer than it can be a long elevator ride.
It's a tall building.
It is a tall building. We're going all the way up. It's like Grey's Anatomy. We're going to be in there for a while. About what Tubman is and what you do.
Yeah, Tubman everything that we do is all about helping people move from fear to freedom. And by helping people experience safety, hope, and healing. And that can be from relationship violence, homelessness, mental and chemical health challenges, trafficking, all of those issues. And really the common denominator is trauma. And we know, we've talked in the last hour plus, you all have been talking about the prevalence of relationship violence and the fact that, some statistics are even higher, that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men may experience physical or sexual violence at some point in their lives. We also know that 75% of people who are experiencing relationship violence are under the age of 25.
And when you say that, I just think, I think everybody immediately puts themselves in the mindset of a 20, like I remember 25. It was just recently. It wasn't. but you remember what life felt like at that time and how confusing it was. And
in general.
and,
Yes.
Yes.
In general.
And to feel so lonely in an experience, a scary experience like that, and not know who to turn to. And Tubman is a place that people can turn to.
Absolutely. And we serve nearly, a little under 20,000 people every single year. It's people of all genders. It's youth, it's adults, it's families, it's people who have used violence. And we do that through safe shelter and longer term housing, all kinds of legal help, mental and chemical health services, and all kinds of youth services.
Wow.
Whether that be prevention in schools. You and I were talking a little bit about your high school experiences with Tubman as a student. And it's a youth drop-in center at a local mall. It's all kinds of services to really help people move forward in their lives.
And I'm curious, Jen, we just got done talking to Justin Baldoni and talking about It Ends With Us and just how that is such a big part of the conversation right now. Do you all see an uptick in calls or in drop-ins with people when something really large in pop culture happens? Do you see, I'm not saying that there's more of it because of it, but do people reach out to you more when they hear about it?
Yes. And I think there's the door is opened a little bit for people to have those conversations with their friends, with their family members, teachers, social people in their world, in their faith communities, at their jobs, all of those things. One piece and one crucial opportunity that I would have loved, the movie did such a beautiful job talking about all the human complexities and the messiness and the love and all of those things, the generational aspects. One piece that I think is really helpful for people to realize is safety planning. And that was an opportunity that I would have loved to have expanded on a little bit in the film.
Yeah.
Is that when we see Lily and her decision to leave, and certainly it was a painful, heart-wrenching decision for her in the film, and yet we know that it's really complex and there are a lot of factors to consider. And she had a pretty smooth go of it.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I do want to talk about that. My earliest understanding of Tubman was when I was in high school. That's when I learned about Tubman. And I do just want to mention the reason that came up is because it actually bears noting. Jen, you've been a part of the Tubman organization professionally since the mid-90s, which is such a huge testament to the wonderful work you do there. And you've been there in multiple capacities. But in the 90s, when I was in high school, that's when I learned about Tubman. And that was my understanding of what Tubman did so well was help people make those safety plans and get out as safely as possible. Because that's the piece, to your point, that maybe wasn't part of the movie or part of the story. It Ends With Us, based on the book written by Colleen Hoover. That wasn't the safety plan, the way to leave safety or safely when you're a victim and the person who has damaged or hurt you is still in the ether, is still around in the world, figuring out how to get as far away as possible when you've got ties to the community you're in, et cetera, it feels nearly impossible. And Tubman, part of what you do is make that possible. Can you talk a little bit more about what kinds of things people need to think about when they're making a safety plan that you also assist with at Tubman?
Absolutely. And in all fairness, right? 2 hours.
Yes, 100%.
So hard to talk about such a
Deep
big topic.
Yeah.
And something that is different in every single situation.
bet.
We heard that from the folks that know more and from Justin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every situation is different. There might be some commonalities. And because every situation is different, we need to realize that all of those options are going to be different for people, right? So there's the safety planning in the moment, and we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
But then there's all of the different things that might be useful to someone. For some people, maybe they do need a safe place to stay temporarily. Maybe they do want an order for protection. But so often we think of, you need to get to a shelter, or you need to get an order for protection. You need to call the police. And for many people, those are the right steps for them. And in some cases, it actually may, it might get worse.
It might
for a while.
exacerbate the situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so there are lots and lots of options and services, and whether it's groups talking with other survivors, all of those things coming together. And there are ways to be safer, even if you're not ready to leave or end your relationship. So a safety plan is something that is tailored to you and your family. There are things that you can do even with kids is really, really young, when they're just talking and walking.
Yeah.
All the way up through youth. There are, it's things like, how do we have a code word in language? Where is the safe place where we can go? What is an object or something that is going to bring your little one comfort if you are leaving, to help them through that transition and help them in that trauma? But safety planning is also the hardcore logistics stuff, right? It's things like, what are the documents that I need to take with me? It may not be safe for me to have a card or a brochure or have Tubman's website in my browser, in my computer. What are some of the things there? What about technology? If I'm on the same cell phone plan,
Oh, yeah.
Find My Phone can be really great when you've got a kid who's just learning how to drive and they're going to a party.
Yeah.
Might not be so great if you're finding your friend
controlling relationship
in
or
that
something.
kind of relationship, right? The financial things. What are some of the, how can you help document some of the things, starting with, the incident that happened and starting to really make a plan, start that paper trail, all of those
For
things.
legal reasons, et cetera.
And you mentioned, my mind always goes to a place of my child. And I can't even imagine how scary that is, because even by law, can you take your child out of the, when somebody's thinking about these things, are there laws around or helpful or some things you need to know that you can, emergency situation, take your kid out of the home because it's their, child too? Yeah.
You can. And then let's talk with folks who are experts in those legal matters in the statutes to help you figure out the longer term solution. But yes, you absolutely have the right to escape the violence in the moment, find safety, catch your breath, and then work through it.
That's just so amazing to know. And that going to your, because that would be a big fear, is just, you wouldn't.
You'd imagine like that doubt would paralyze you from doing anything
Absolutely.
to begin with, right?
If that's, there's.
And especially when that's what your partner who's being abusive is telling you.
Exactly.
Okay, so
If you leave,
yeah.
I will kill you. If you leave, I will make sure you never see your baby again.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that. We're talking with Jen Polzin, CEO of Tubman, a local organization. We're talking about domestic violence here on this My Talk roundtable. And I want to talk about one of the things we heard about in the last hour when we were talking with Justin Baldoni from the movie It Ends With Us and the members of the No More organization who helped advise on the film. They talked about the isolation, the very intentional and calculated isolation that people who are victims of domestic violence are sort of sort of corralled into. I want to talk a little bit about that and how Tubman helps kind of put that back together. We're talking about domestic violence today on My Talk 1071. I'm Colleen Lindstrom. I'm here with Brittany and Kendall. And thank you guys for letting me crash here
you
and
mean
hang out.
direct the ship?
Yes.
Colleen,
It's
please
been-
stop.
yeah.
It's an honor to have you here. You've done so many of these, and you're doing a wonderful job.
Well, and to your point, we started doing My Talk roundtables many years ago when we found that there were times where pop culture brought us an opportunity to go on a deeper dive, to talk a little bit more than just our frivolous kind of high level Hollywood gossip. And this is just one of those occasions. The movie It Ends With Us made a huge splash. And at the root of that movie is a conversation about domestic violence. And so we spent the first hour of this program talking with Justin Baldoni, the director, the star, the producer of It Ends With Us, and then two members of the organization Know More, about how they advised on the film. And now this hour, we're so fortunate to be joined by somebody who knows this organization so very well, Jen Polzin from Tubman, talking about kind of what's right here locally available as a resource, as a haven for people who are experiencing domestic violence and other so many other things. But Jen, first of all, thank you.
Thank you.
And we're just going to keep you for the rest of this hour. We're clear. We're just going to keep going. We talked about at the very end of the last segment, we talked about something they referenced earlier in the show about how people who are victims of domestic violence are very systematically and in a calculated manner isolated. And maybe the person who is acting in violence toward them cuts them off from friends and family members in one certain way, or makes them think a certain way about the people in their life. And that is part of what makes it so hard to leave those situations. And what do you first of all, how do you kind of navigate that? And then how do you at Tubman help put that back together?
That's a great question. So the isolation in the last segment or in the first top of the hour, you all were talking a little bit about love bombing, and how it feels so, it's a new relationship. You're in love with this person. Everything is just, it's got that glow, right? And you want to spend more and more time with that person because it's new, it's fresh, you love them. And then some of those signs that can sometimes happen, and love bombing doesn't happen in every abusive relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is something that now we've got that language to describe.
It's a sign.
It's a sign, absolutely. And the isolation can be really gradual, or it can be, I just love you so much, I don't want to share you. You can, you know what? You can see your family. Let's make new traditions, just us. And so it's a way of you feel even more special sometimes, that this person loves you so much they want to spend all their time with you. And that isolation also plays into the gaslighting, right? The stuff that you start to wonder, did that really happen? Am I crazy? I don't,
Right. And that's something that really was portrayed so well in the film.
Beautifully.
Right? Is that you come at it from the perspective of a person who's in that. And this is also the part, I'm sorry, I'm totally interrupting you, but I'm so excited by this conversation because it's the thing I think a lot of times people don't take into account when they say the thing, just leave. Like it's a just.
Yeah.
It's the awareness of the person who's in it they're not always as aware as you would imagine of what exactly is going on.
Right.
So it's not that easy.
We saw it in the movie when it was like, oh, baby, you just fell down the stairs.
Yeah.
What happened? You just fell down the stairs. I would say that the isolation and the why don't you just leave, right? It's intentional.
Yeah.
And some of the ways to break through that are to think about even just sometimes if I say the thing out loud and say that this is happening in my relationship, then I might have to do something.
It's
about
real.
Then it makes it real.
It's
It
real.
makes it
Yeah,
real.
that's so true.
If I name it, if I speak my truth,
Yeah.
then it makes it real.
Or if I tell somebody close to me, there's going to be accountability that's going to be real.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be about what am I going to do? And I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I'm just still in the stages of trying to figure out, is this happening? Is it not? How do I leave? How do I figure out all the logistics?
Yeah.
How do we separate our stuff, or if we own property together, or the kids, or the car, right?
Pets. We talked about pets.
Yeah.
How so many times women don't want to leave. Obviously, if you have children, but with your pets, you're like, if you're doing this to me, who's
Right.
to say what you're going to do to our dog?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Knowing that it's important to me. Are there things that people with
Yeah.
pets can you help them?
Absolutely. So we know that nationally, about 80% of survivors who have pets tell us that their pets have been either abused or even killed as revenge or intimidation. And you think about what an impossible choice that is.
Yeah.
It would be like having, it's part of your family,
Yeah.
right?
It's a living being.
It's
Yeah.
a living being. And so there is a big national effort underway to make sure that 25% of domestic violence programs are pet friendly by the year 2025.
Oh, that's
which is
beautiful.
just right around the corner. So Tubman and other organizations right here in the Twin Cities are joining forces to expand the number of volunteer fosters so that people can get that more immediate access. And at Tubman, we're also raising funds to open Harriet's Haven for Pets right on site at Tubman so that people can bring their pets with them.
Wow.
And can heal together, because we know
There's support.
it's
Well,
it's
yeah.
part of that healing.
Especially you got, I've always come back to a place of kids, but you got your kid and missing his dog, his cat. I think that's just so amazing that you guys think through the whole picture at Tubman. We've talked a lot about these things, and sometimes I find myself going like, what can we do? What can I do? What differences can I make? Can I volunteer? Like, what does Tubman need from, people here in the community?
Right. Do you need diapers? Do you need formula? Do you need dog leashes? Do you
Yeah.
need beds? Do you need, right.
Yeah. So we have information on our website, which is just tubman.org, about different items that we need. And so it's donations of stuff, right? It might be, I just heard this week that we need sheets and towels, right? We needed backpacks to help people get back to school.
Back to school, yeah.
Those kinds of things, right? It might be personal hygiene items at our youth drop-in center. So it might be pet supplies to send with the fosters, right? It's all kinds of things. And so checking or calling is a great way to see what we're most in need of. I also will say that we have the most amazing community members here in this community who are interested in volunteering, in interning. Maybe they're students who are figuring out their career path. We also need longer term volunteers, and we use volunteers in every aspect of our work, whether that be at the drop-in center, whether it be answering the helpline, helping people navigate resources, facilitating support groups, all kinds of things. And the other thing, I'm just going to say it, we need cash, y'all.
Yeah.
And the reason that I say fueling the resources of the work is because the vast majority of our budget is staff to be providing the services.
Yeah.
The other types of things that we can do when we're resourced is we have something called the Freedom Fund, which means that we can provide emergency cash assistance to people who are using our services so that they can get the locks changed on their door
Yeah.
after an abusive incident, so that they can stay in their home and not have to leave and start all over again.
Yeah.
Not have to worry about their leaving their home and starting over, which is such a huge financial endeavor, or get a bag of groceries to last them through the next payday, or get copies of their birth certificates so that they can continue to move forward. All of those real life, just little bit of help.
Jen Polzin from Tubman, CEO of Tubman, as you're talking, I am struck I think sometimes when we're taking, when we're not, I don't know, when we're not being close, when we're not close to the topic, we're not truly thinking about the breadth and depth of all of the aspects of life that you have to employ and think about when you are choosing to escape a situation that is unsafe for you and your family. And I imagine at Tubman, you call on truly people from all different professions and modalities, from
Absolutely.
lawyers to social workers to therapists to, I don't know,
To advocates
like
who can speak on behalf, right?
Right.
Group facilitators,
Translators.
youth workers.
So
Absolutely.
as I'm thinking about this, maybe there's somebody in the audience with some sort of special skill, and they're thinking, I want to be a part, like I want to give my special talent, whatever that is. That's something that, sometimes money is not always available for people to give, but
Absolutely.
a talent or a thing,
their
time.
knowledge and
Notary.
expertise.
Yeah,
Like,
notary.
like
Oh my
a
gosh,
notary,
right?
like, yeah, you don't even think of these things when
Financial
you're not
advisors.
in the situation. The things that you've already brought to light here that we have been privileged to not have to think about is amazing.
I want to give a shout out to our incredible staff who provides amazing training, both in orientation and overview. We go through all of the criminal background and the application process and all of those things to make sure that we're helping to keep the people we serve safe, and to make sure that people are not unintentionally maybe reinforcing, right, so that it's relevant to the people that we're serving. And so there's a great training program. People would be supported throughout that process so that they can really make that impact.
That's so wonderful.
Jen, we asked Jane and Pamela from No More a couple questions earlier that I want you to be able to answer them too, because they're so specific to this situation. One is, if you see it in yourself or you see a friend that you think, are they in a domestic violence or an abuse situation? One, what can you say to them to help this conversation, how you can be there for them? And two, on a broader level, how do we kind of start to slow down and hopefully stop this cycle?
Those are big questions and important
know.
questions. Thank you for asking them. So the first thing is, I would just reiterate to say, you don't have to have the perfectly phrased question, right? You can just say, are you okay? I'm worried about you. And you can, based on what they share with you, you can go a step further and say, I'm noticing some things and I'm scared about your safety. And if someone doesn't want to talk about it, to be able to honor their choice and their autonomy as they're sorting through it, to say, it's okay, just know that I'm here. Just know that I'm here for you.
Be there.
And then be there.
Yeah.
And then I think there are some other really just basic messages that we can reinforce. You're not alone. The abuse isn't your fault.
Oh, amen.
And there are places, Tubman and other organizations in this community, that are there to help.
Yeah.
And just can be there any step of the way. And then to be able to just have those resources when you're ready. If you want to talk, I can help connect you. And then you don't have to worry about, am I going to say something wrong? Can they, right? Like we can help make that safety plan with the survivor, because it's all about what the survivor wants and needs, and the choices that they want to make. And they really, it's a phrase we use all the time, but they really are driving the bus.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we've got the maps. An analogy you might like, we've got the snacks.
Yes.
We've got the map. We've got the, we're there to help co-pilot, to make sure that there's gas in the car. But they're choosing the destination.
Which I can, I'm so sorry, Brittany. I just imagine what a gift that is when you've been in a situation where you felt very powerless, to be given that power by somebody.
But also scary, right?
Right.
Like, I was thinking we're on the same wavelength. I thought that same thing. It's so empowering that you're saying that, but also terrifying if you've been somebody who hasn't had control or even know, the first things about some of the aspects that they haven't taken on in their life. I mean, it's got to have both sides of that coin.
Absolutely. Which is why it's all about pacing and working with the survivor, right? And being able to say, it's okay, you got this. Or if you don't know how to do that, that's cool. Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Jen Polzin, from Tubman. I want to say thank you. I'm just looking at the clock, and I know I've got a bunch of things that I want to make sure everybody knows.
Yeah.
But in this moment, I just need to say thank you again, not only for being here with us, but truly for the work that you do and have done for Tubman for all these many years. It is such important work in our community, and such important work for people who are suffering and feel powerless. And
It's
giving
an
them
honor
power
to
is
get to do
beautiful.
it. And I say this all the time. We get to have a front row seat to hope.
Yeah. Oh.
And we see people making these enormous changes in their lives. And it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So, and we need everyone, all of your listeners, right? That's the other most important thing that people can do is be an ambassador.
I love it. Jen Polzin from Tubman. Can you shout out the website one more time so that people
Absolutely.
know?
So Harriet Tubman is our namesake and inspiration. So the website is simply tubman.org.
Thank you so much, Jen Polzin. I also want to say thank you to our first hour guests. If you missed any part of this, you can still listen to it. Justin Baldoni from It Ends With Us, the producer, director, and star of the movie. And then we also had Pamela Zaballa and Jane Randel from the organization No More with us in the first hour. If you missed it, you can go back and listen to the podcast. Just search My Talk Roundtable anywhere you get your podcasts. But also, if you're just hanging out and you're thinking, I wish it would be served up to me, it will be. Because this will be rebroadcast between 6 and 8 o'clock this evening. And so there's lots of different ways that you can continue to interact.
And if you didn't get any of the websites or the links, we're going to put them all on My Talks page. We're going to have a landing page that you can go to so you don't have to scramble and look for a scrap of paper. We're going to have all those links available to you as well.
We got you.
We got you.
What an incredible conversation. I think we all three of us agree. What a privilege to be a part of it.
Unbelievable. And I think we all learned things.
Yeah.
I think, and hopefully you as a listener have had an opportunity to consider things from a different angle.
Or feel heard.
Or feel heard, right? Because that's truly what was, we heard our friend, he's our friend now, Justin Baldoni from It Ends With Us, talk about how important it was for him to make sure that people felt heard. And so thank you again, Jen Polzin from Tubman. And thank you, Brittany and Kendall,
Thank
for
you,
giving up
Colleen.
this moment. This was great.
No, it was an honor to be a part of it. And thank you so much for coming on and facilitating this.
It was a pleasure to do. It's such an important conversation. And thank you all for listening.